Okay, so what do you think? Should we start? Okay, I think in the interest of time, we will go ahead and start. And if we have some grantees joining us later, maybe we can go back and repeat some of those most important things we're going to talk about today. So the objectives of today's webinar are to, let me just go to this screen. To briefly overview the QPR changes. So this is going to be really a brief overview. You will have access to the detailed reporting instructions and examples in the QPR user's manual, and also we put together recording of the instructions, and both are going to be available on tobaccofreecolorado.org and also attached to the QPR distribution email. Then we are going to briefly talk about progress reporting and then review SMART goals, what, how, and why. So, sorry, we are having a little trouble to, okay. So, we have two groups of grantees, competitive grantees, TA and media grantees, and then the local health agencies. So we would like to start with the competitive grantees, TA and media. So there are no major changes to reporting format or requirement for this group of grantees. We just want to remind everybody that your activities in the QPR should match the primary activities in your scope of work. And also because those are most probably changing each fiscal year, we expect you to re-enter your activities in first quarter of each fiscal year, and then those are going to be pre-populated in subsequent quarters of the same fiscal year. So one thing which was changed is that we actually have an implementation in a separate table. And maybe I'll let Shannon to explain about this.
Okay, so this table follows behind the challenges and facilitators table in the same section for your foundational activities and strategy reporting. So where these look like they are blank sections next to those will actually carry down the descriptors that you use in the page before this. So if you say activity 1 is something really cool that we're doing, whatever it is, you have a cool title for your activity, and then you will report on the challenges and facilitators in the previous table, and then when you come down to this table, that same name will be here so that you know that you're reporting implementation and reach for that same activity here. And then you go ahead and fill in the who, what, when, where, why, how many, how much, all those kinds of things for implementation, and the number for reach. If you have more than one implementation activity thing that needs to go be attached to the same scope of work activities, you have multiple different, is there a better word for that than I'm saying, Vladka? You have multiple different parts of your implementation or whatever it is that are not necessarily together that you report together in one block. You would go down here to numbered 16 through I think 25. I've added extra spaces there. So just match the same title that you're using for the previous table that's carrying through here. So mine was super cool activity 1. And then even though it's number 16, I would say it's super cool activity 1 again in that text box there, and then write out my implementation for that additional activity that I'm doing and the reach that that activity has. So any subsequent ones that you have there. So if you have 3 different implementation pieces to the same activity that you implemented all in the same quarter, you can report all of those and separate out their reach and the implementation steps that you used.
Yeah.
Does that cover it?
Yes, it does. Yeah, thank you. So now to the local health agencies. So there are some changes in requirement. So everybody is expected to report on foundational activity 3 on the price education. You do not necessarily have to report on all of the community education you delivered, but definitely it is required that you would report on the price education part of it. And then the grantees who are contracted to work on foundational activities should report on those efforts. And we really encourage you to aggregate the settings and scorings to the best of your ability. So the example we keep giving, and which you can find in our instructions, is that if you are working, say, in 3 different schools, you don't necessarily have to report extra for each school. You can aggregate those reports and just describe in the progress summary where you are, what you are doing, and then go to the scoring and average the scoring for those 3 schools together instead of reporting separately. For the grantees who are contracted to do strategy work, you are no longer required to report on foundational activity except as noted above on the price education. You need to report on that. But of course, if you choose to report on the foundational activity, you still can do that. So we would like you to, and we actually started to ask you to do that in Q4, but unfortunately it's not always happening. So we just would like to underscore that we would appreciate if you could please enter all the strategies which are listed in your implementation plan. And then you would, because all of those are going to be pre-populated.
I believe we do have a shredder. I have not used it.
Report period. I'm very sorry, I can hear somebody in the background.
But like I said, I haven't used it. It might maybe
I'm very sorry. I just, if you could please check if your microphone is muted.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure whose it is. That one. Allison. Allison? Muted. Okay, thanks for muting the microphone. Thank you, I appreciate that. So, yeah, so we were talking about the strategies portfolio. So if you could enter all the strategies which are in your implementation plan, again, you would need to do it just once because all of those would be pre-populated for you. And then we would really like you to report on the progress on all of those strategies. So if you didn't work on the strategy, you would still open that progress report. You can select the same scores as you did in the previous quarter, and then just say in the progress summary that you didn't work on this particular strategy in this particular quarter, and just move to the next strategy, or if you wish, to the foundational activity. So that's one thing we would like to mention, because you know, if you didn't enter any scores, then the next quarter, of course, you know, it would not be pre-populated because you didn't enter any data. So that's why it is important, and it's also important that we kind of have this longitudinal data. So just for your reference, this is steps matrix of your strategies. So you can always go back to this document and see what are the strategies you should be entering into Qualtrics, into the QPR. And there are 2 possible scenarios. One is that you would not longer want to report on something, like for example, we just said that you don't necessarily have to report on the foundational activities if you're a grantee working on strategy. Then we actually, or Shannon, created this option that you no longer have to report on this activity. So you can see this button on the first page of the progress report. And so if you know that you don't want to longer report on certain activity, not meaning this quarter, meaning that you are either done with it or you no longer are working on it, then you can select this option, and it will force you to put some text into the progress summary, so you can just explain why is it that you're not going to be reporting on that activity anymore, and just move to another strategy or foundational activity.
So just to reiterate on that one, I want to make sure people understand, you only need to click that button at the bottom if you are no longer going forward in the rest of the grant cycle going to be reporting on this. And largely that's going to be because it was foundational activity and you're not going to report on your foundational activities. You're only going to report on the strategies you're working on because that's the level that you're working at.
Yes. So anybody has any questions about that?
Does that strategy? Hi, Terry Rousey here, CDPHE STEP program. Hi, guys. Thank you. Just a quick clarification for myself. Then does the system reset each quarter, so where you answer this question again, or does it just automatically remove that strategy from the reporting system for that grantee?
We're going to try to remove the strategy from the reporting system for the grantee, so it shouldn't show up in your subsequent quarters. So if you were just on pause with something and you're going to come back and do it later, don't click that. Just say that in the progress summary. We're not currently working on this. This is on hold for now, whatever you need to describe there, and go on through the rest of the normal stuff, putting the minimal information in. But don't actually click that button because it will disappear from your reporting going forward.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yes.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for asking that question. It's important. So another scenario is that you started to work on something what is not in your implementation plan. And for that, we added the emerging activities option in the drop-down menu. So again, if you started to work on something you didn't plan on working on in the beginning, you can use this emerging activity option and report under that.
And let's just to point out that that's kind of with the blessing or at the discretion of your POC as well. So don't come in reporting you're working on emerging activities that you've just kind of gone rogue on. Make sure you know your POC is looped in on that and knows that that's going forward. But then this gives you space to provide information on what you're doing that may not fit the framework that is set up here, but is approved by your POC and STEPP.
Yeah, thanks for the clarification. Okay, so to summarize all of this, if you need more information on how to fill in the QPR, please refer to the user's manual or our video or this webinar, or you can always reach us at the evaluation TA at ucdenver.edu. The videos and the manuals are going to be posted, as I said, on the STEPP's website on the Tobacco Free Colorado. And again, if you need us, please do not hesitate to contact us at our email account. So with that, we would like to.
And for everyone who's been asking, those that email and the QPR information should all be coming out this afternoon, so you should see it today. Get excited.
Okay, so we would like to talk a little bit about SMART goals. You are, I'm sure, all aware of this. So the SMART goals are goals which are specific, which are measurable, which are attainable, realistic, and time-bound. And we want to talk about this because it is important that in your quarterly progress report, when you are reporting on your activities, you are actually, or we put in this framework for each activity, and we would like you to tell us what is it that you want to achieve, what is your objective. And so far, we have some good SMART goals, but then we have some which are not that specific. So that's why we would like to kind of talk about it a little bit to let you know what our expectation is. And it's good for you, for the grantees as well, because that kind of gives you the benchmark you are working toward. and it helps you to see where you are in your progress achieving that benchmark. So this is the little box we would like you to put the SMART goals in. And here is the crosswalk, sorry, of the framework you have in your implementation plans and the framework which we have in the QPR. So you can refer to that if you need to, but as you can see, pretty much all the individual steps of those frameworks are very similar. Ours is a little more detailed. So like step 4 is split into, step 6 is split into. The only step which doesn't appear in the policy continuum is the number 3, which we said like provide assistance, education, and other resources to community and strategic partners. It is an important step. Of course, if that's not what you are doing, you can always say not required and just move on. But this is just for your reference. So here we would like to show you that actually, you know, you already pretty much have the SMART goals in your implementation plan. So you just kind of have to combine those categories. In your activities, in your implementation plan, you have like those specific activities you would like to achieve. Then you have estimated time frame, desired outcomes, which should be attainable and realistic, because if you discussed it with your POCs, that's what, you know, should automatically be the case. And then measurable is how would you know that you are actually achieving what you set to achieve. So is the time bound? I just want to mention that we are kind of looking for you to, if possible, put the specific goal which pertains to the whole grant cycle. But of course, because those SMART goals are broken by the framework steps, you might want to achieve something sooner than the other activities in the framework. So it doesn't necessarily have to be the same time frame for all for all the steps in the framework for the particular strategy or foundational activity.
Okay, SMART goals in action. So you're looking at your initial goal. We're going to make sure it's specific. What are you going to accomplish? What needs to be included? Back to time bound, when are you going to do this by, and why is this a goal? Just so you have a very specific place that you're going with that. Measurable, how are you going to measure this progress to know you're successful? So that might be an increase in the number of visitors, but not just an increase. Maybe it's increased by 100, or, you know, very measurable, so that you have a very definite number benchmark that you're working towards. Achievable, is this realistic, or is this some wild plan you have? Obviously, we'd love to decrease tobacco utilization by 100%, but that's not necessarily achievable in the time span that we're working in. So just making sure that you're being realistic with the skills you have and what you can and cannot do to get to where you're trying to go right now. Which also ties in realistic. Why are we setting this goal now? And is it aligned with our overall objectives? And then back to time bound. Is it realistic to have this deadline be in the next month or next quarter or next year or by the end of the grant cycle? Just so you, again, back to setting that benchmark of when you're going to be able to have finished this, so that it's realistic and measurable, using all our same words, which isn't totally helpful, sorry.
Okay, so we here is kind of summary of what should happen. So when you are working toward setting SMART goals, so you kind of start with what it is really, you know, what the problem is, and then what it is that you want to do, and you can write those little statements about, you know, the specific steps you are going to try to achieve, how you're going to measure it, is it achievable, is it relevant, and when we are gonna try to achieve what we set to achieve, and then kind of rephrase all those individual points so that you will end up with one concise SMART goal. So here are some examples from the QPR. I just pull a few to demonstrate that you know, they are good goals, but they are not very specific and not very measurable. And also, you know, we are usually missing the time frame in it. So we have grantees saying that their goal is to know who their partners are and have a relationship with them, which is you know, what they really want to achieve. But at the same time, you know, it would be very helpful if this goal was a little more, as I said, specific and measurable and time bounded. The same goes with the other examples. So that's why we wanted to talk to you about that, to make sure that when you are setting those objectives in that framework for specific strategies and foundational activities, that you would pay attention to that. And it's again, not just for us to see how you progress, but also for you to kind of know where you are, because if you have more specific goal, then it's easier to know if you are achieving it or not. So we just kind of put together you know, those, or presented those specific points here, and we're thinking that maybe we could kind of you know, take some example and try to together kind of have this little exercise about creating a SMART goal. I don't know if you would be interested, or if you feel that from what we said you have enough information. So please let us know. We can certainly go through it. Or if you feel like you know, we got it, this is a little redundant, then we don't have to be using your time. I don't know how everybody feels about that. So if I don't hear from anybody that they would like to proceed with the exercise, then I think we can just skip it if you feel like what we just talked about is sufficient. So I wait for another few seconds to see if somebody would be interested in this. Okay, so I take it that this was, oh, just a second. We are checking our chat to see if somebody didn't ask us a question.
So someone is struggling with a component of, we've already touched on, how to translate implementation plan to the evaluation framework. Steps 1 through 9. So if you have your implementation plan, how to...
Let me go back to the implementation plan slide. Okay. So I don't know who asked that question. If you want to be more specific about it, you can unmute and let us know what is it exactly that you would like us to explain.
Hi, this is Annie Briquette from San Juan Basin. So I guess what I'm hoping you'll explain is maybe just give an example of a primary activity and sub-activities and how it gets translated into a SMART goal in steps 1 through 9.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I noticed that in some of the implementation plans, the grantees did use similar framework as we did to set the activities and sub-activities, and some grantees in some of those implementation plans, there is not like clear parallel to that. But I think, you know, if you kind of look at the framework, and let me go to that slide. think it was the previous one, sorry about that. So in the framework is pretty much there to kind of go through the steps you would most probably take if you want to achieve the goal for that specific strategy or foundational activity. So if it says like identify or engage strategic partners, then that's probably something you had mentioned in your implementation plan. So for that particular step in the framework, you can look in your implementation plan, find those activities you set as far as identifying the strategic partners, and kind of bundle those columns together to create the SMART goal for that particular step in the framework. So like Shannon was saying, it might be like by the end of this fiscal year, we would like to contact 50% of the potential stakeholders we identified, and then maybe tell us a little bit about how you want to do that. But I don't know if this is answering your question or if you had something else in mind.
No, that was really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, sure. Yeah, no problem. Okay. Do we have any other questions? Okay, so if we don't have any other questions, then I just want to summarize that the SMART goals are really critical to understand how you know when you have achieved your objective, and they actually force you to make your outcome indicators more specific, actionable, translational, achievable, measurable, evaluable. So those are good things to think about and put it
right. And I know they kind of sound a little overwhelming if that's not what you've been using so far, or to go back and have to construct them at this point. But if you can create these SMART goals, then you have these very specific goals that you're aiming to hit, benchmarks that you're aiming to hit. And so you really know that, yes, we're doing that. Yes, we've engaged X number of stakeholders. We've interfaced with 12 different schools, where, whatever it is, so that we have this many more left to do. We have this part left to do, and it just makes it so when you finish, but you also know where you are along the way, that it's not kind of floating out there in space. It's something that you're actually working towards, and you have steps in your goal as to how you're going to get there.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, that's a good summary.
Right. So the work it puts into really creating and thinking about how you're going to have these SMART goals, how you're going to craft the wording around them and stuff, ultimately will really pay off, because you'll also be able to demonstrate that you achieved them. You were able to do this, this, and this, which got you to where you needed to be in.
And, those are not written in stone. So if you work on something and then realize like, well, I thought in the beginning it's going to be achievable, and now I realize, well, maybe the time frame was too tight, or something changed what kind of prevents you from finishing it the way you wanted, then by any means you can go back and revisit those SMART goals. But as Shannon said, those are really good benchmarks which do help you to see where you are in the process. So again, I'll just ask one more time if anybody has any questions, and if not, we can conclude this webinar. Okay, so we don't see or hear any questions. So thank you so very much for your attention. And again, if you have any questions related to evaluation, if you want us to help you to create those SMART goals, or if you have any problems with the QPR, please, by any means, reach out to us. We are here to support you. So thank you so very much, and have a great day, and have a great holidays. Bye-bye.